They say the rain remembers. It falls where sorrow once lived, and it never forgets the names whispered beneath it. Tonight, it falls for me. I can still smell the blood on the midwife's hands, hear the thunder outside as two cries tore the night apart. One dark as the storm, the other pale as lightning. My sons. My sins. My miracles. I held them close, one to my left breast, one to my right, and I prayed the rain would wash them both clean. But heaven was silent that night. The candle by my bedside shook like it feared what it saw. And when I looked into their faces, I knew the world would never let them breathe the same air, sleep under the same roof, or call me mother in the same voice. The midwife stepped back, trembling. Her eyes refused to meet mine. Outside, I heard boots in the mud. Voices. Someone had seen the light through my window. Please, not yet. Just one more moment. I pressed their tiny hands together, black and white, two halves of a secret that could burn the world. And as the door burst open, I realized, the storm outside wasn't the one I should have feared. They called me Amara. Said it meant eternal. But nothing in my world stayed that way. Not freedom. Not peace. Not love. I was born under the smell of cotton and smoke, the Harrington plantation, where the sky always looked too big, and every dream was small enough to fit in a closed fist. The days began with the bell, ended with the whip, and somewhere in between, I learned how to disappear. To be quiet. To be nothing. But the heart doesn't forget itself so easily. Even when the world tells you not to feel, your soul still remembers the sound of your own voice. I used to hide behind the smokehouse after chores, my hands black with ash, my dress stiff with sweat. There, in the dirt, I traced letters I'd seen in the overseer's ledger. I didn't know what they meant then. But the curves and lines felt like prayers. Like promises waiting to be spoken. That's where Thomas found me. The master's youngest son. He was only a few years older than me, but his eyes carried that wild restlessness I'd seen in trapped birds, born inside cages so pretty, they didn't notice the bars. He asked me what I was doing. I said, drawing. He smiled. Those aren't drawings, those are letters. Then he took a stick from the ground and drew beside me. His hand moved slow, patient, deliberate. The shape was strange, curved, but he said it was the letter A. A for what? I asked. He looked at me for a long time and whispered. A for Amara. That was the first time I heard my name as if it belonged to something sacred. After that, he found reasons to linger. Bringing scraps of paper, half-broken pencils, an old hymn book no one used. He said reading was a way to see the world without chains. I told him, reading don't stop the whip. He answered, maybe not. But it can teach you where the whip comes from. At night, I'd whisper words to myself until they became songs. Each page I read felt like a window cracked open, just enough to taste air that wasn't mine. Then one night, Thomas left something wrapped in white cloth by the window. When I unwrapped it, it wasn't a book. It was a mirror. I had never owned one. We weren't allowed to. The mistress said vanity was a sin for women like me. I held it up to the candlelight. And for the first time, I saw myself. My skin, my eyes, the scar on my cheek from when the overseer's whip missed its mark. I saw the fear. But I also saw something deeper, defiance. When Thomas returned, he asked what I thought. I told him the truth. I see a woman who ain't supposed to exist, but does. He smiled like sunlight breaking through clouds. And for a moment, the world didn't feel so cruel. He started visiting more often, bringing books, poems, even small pieces of bread when food was scarce. He said he wanted to hear me read aloud. So I did. My voice trembled at first, but he listened like each word was gold. He said my voice reminded him of the wind through pine trees. I told him wind can carry more than whispers, it can carry freedom. He said, then let it carry mine too. Sometimes, when the moon was high and the others slept, we'd sit by the edge of the field. He'd talk about places I couldn't imagine, cities with lights, ships with sails so wide they blocked the stars. I told him the only ships I'd ever seen were the ones that stole people. He didn't answer that. For months, it went on that way. Half in silence, half in danger. Every smile between us was a crime. Every touch, a secret carved in stone. One night, when he brushed a curl from my face, I pulled away. He looked hurt. But I wasn't afraid of him, I was afraid of what would follow. Because love, on land like this, wasn't a blessing. It was a curse dressed in white skin. Still, he came. Still, I waited. Still, I read the letters he left hidden in the hollow of the willow tree by the creek. Letters full of promises, of dreams too dangerous to say aloud. He wrote. If there is a God, he will forgive the way I see you, not as a servant, but as the world itself. I never wrote back, but I kept every note. Tucked them under my pillow like stolen stars. Then one evening, I caught my reflection in the mirror again. The candle had burned low, its flame weak and trembling. And for a split second, I saw something behind me. A shadow that didn't belong to either of us. I turned, but no one was there. Still, the air felt colder. Heavier. As if the house itself was listening. I should have shattered that mirror then and there. But I didn't. Because it was the only proof I had that I was real. That I wasn't just hands for labor or lips for prayer. That I was a woman, alive, learning, dangerous in ways no one yet understood. But the thing about mirrors is, they don't just show your face. They show what's coming for you. And what it showed me next, was something I could never unsee. Days bled into years. Every sunrise looked the same, red soil, white walls, black hands. Every step I took was branded with someone else's name, someone else's chain. The plantation lived like a single body. The master was its mind. The overseer its hands. And we were the blood that kept it alive. The field stretched so wide they swallowed the horizon. Sometimes, when the heat shimmered over the cotton rows, I thought the earth itself might melt from sorrow. Life had rules, and each one was carved in fear. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't meet the mistress's eyes. Don't dream. But dreams came anyway, they always do. They snuck in through hunger and silence, wearing the faces of people you loved. The mistress, Evelyn Harrington, moved like porcelain, perfect, breakable, and cold. She prayed over every meal as though holiness could hide cruelty. Her hands never touched the earth, yet they ruled it. And though she looked through us as if we were smoke, I saw the truth buried in her eyes. She hated her own reflection more than she hated mine. Perhaps that's why she kept her mirrors covered in lace. Or perhaps she feared what truth looked like when it wore her face. Thomas no longer came to the smokehouse. He no longer left books or mirrors or hope. He moved like a ghost, there, but gone. Each glance we shared was a word we couldn't afford to speak. He'd become his father's shadow, walking the plantation with the overseer, pretending not to know me. But guilt leaves marks you can't hide. Every time our eyes met, his shoulders stiffened, like a man carrying a secret that burned through bone. The other workers noticed too. Whispers followed me like flies. They said I'd been favored, that trouble was coming. And they were right. One evening, as I gathered linens from the line, the overseer passed by, his smell of sweat and tobacco thick in the air. Something fell from his coat pocket, a letter, folded clean, sealed with red wax still warm. I bent to pick it up, meaning to hand it back. But the seal caught the candlelight. And I saw it. The Harrington crest. And beneath it, a name, Thomas Harrington. The overseer snatched it from my hand too quickly. Too defensive. Too afraid. Later that night, when the quarters slept, I couldn't let it go. My thoughts beat louder than my heart. What business did the overseer have with Thomas? And why was the letter sealed with the mark usually reserved for trade, not for family? The next morning, I saw the overseer again, this time in the stables, whispering to the master, handing him the same folded paper. The wax had been broken. The master's face turned pale, then hard. He nodded once. Something in my chest went cold. Hours later, I found that letter again. It had fallen near the steps of the big house, mud-stained but still legible. The words bled into the page, but one line cut through the blur like a knife. Shipment to the islands. One female, unbroken. I froze. That word, unbroken, was the kind they used for animals. For bodies meant to be sold, not souls meant to live. My breath caught. My knees weakened. It didn't name me, but it didn't need to. I knew. I had always known. Freedom was not the opposite of chains, it was their promise. Because once they see your spirit rising, they'll find a way to break it. And just when the overseer turned away, I saw something else at the bottom of the page, a signature in ink I recognized. Thomas's. That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter's words wouldn't leave me: shipment, unbroken, female. They circled my mind like vultures. The candle burned low, the wick twisting, whispering its last. Then, footsteps. Light, hurried, desperate. It was Thomas. His clothes were wet with rain, his eyes wild, not with guilt this time, but fear. He said his father had found out. About the books. About the mirror. About the way he looked at me. I wanted to ask how, but I already knew. Secrets don't stay buried long on cursed ground. He grabbed my hands, shaking. Amara, he whispered, you have to leave. Tonight. His breath smelled like whiskey and panic. He said his father had written my name, that letter I found was real. They were sending me away. He swore he'd fix it. That he'd make it right. That he'd come for me. Then he said something that still haunts me. Run with me. The words hung in the air like a promise carved into glass, fragile, shining, doomed to break. I looked at him, really looked. At his trembling hands, the bruise on his cheek, the boy who'd once taught me letters now too afraid to speak one more truth. And I realized he wasn't a savior. He was a man standing on a bridge that could burn from either end. Still. I wanted to believe him. So I said yes. He kissed my forehead like an apology. And then he was gone. I waited. All night. Listening for his return, clutching the bundle of books he'd given me as if paper could protect flesh. But dawn came. And with it, silence. When I stepped outside, I saw them, nailed to the tree near the road. Posters. The ink still fresh, the edges damp from morning dew. I walked closer. And there it was. His name. Thomas Harrington, runaway. The word runaway curled like smoke, choking my breath. They said he'd fled north, toward freedom, toward everything I wasn't allowed to have. The same north he used to tell me about when we whispered of oceans and stars. But I knew better. I knew the look in his eyes last night, not the gaze of a man running toward something, but one running from something. And what he left behind couldn't run. Couldn't hide. Could only wait. The quarters buzzed with rumors, whispers that the master's son had gone mad, that he'd stolen gold, that he'd taken me with him. The mistress stayed in her chambers all morning. No hymns. No prayers. Only silence so heavy it bent the air. Then, a knock on my door. A housemaid's voice, trembling. Mistress Evelyn wants you. Now. I wiped my hands, though they were already clean. My heart thudded in my throat, every step up the staircase echoing like judgment. The closer I came, the colder the air felt, as though the house itself was holding its breath. When I reached her room, the door was open. She sat by the window, pale light tracing her face. Her hands clutched a rosary, the beads clicking like bones. She didn't look at me right away. She just said, softly, almost kindly. Amara, sit down. I obeyed. She turned then. And in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before, not cruelty, not even hatred. But sorrow. And that scared me more than anything. That morning, Mistress Evelyn called me to her room, and what she said made my knees tremble like the floorboards themselves. Evelyn's voice was gentle. Too gentle. She asked if I'd sinned against her household. If I'd tempted her son. If I'd prayed to false gods. I said no. She smiled then, like winter sunlight. Cold. Sharp. Beautiful only from a distance. Then she said. You'll be moved to the big house. I need a new maid. My heart sank, but I curtsied, just like she'd taught me years before. Because on that land, obedience was survival, and silence was armor. The big house smelled of wax and roses. But beneath it, iron. The kind that never rusts because it's fed by fear. At night, I could hear him, the master. His boots heavy in the corridor. The sound of power pacing. Every creak of the floorboards meant danger. Every breath felt borrowed. Some nights, the boots stopped at my door. And the silence that followed was worse than the noise. Days passed. Then weeks. I worked beside Evelyn, bathing her, dressing her, pinning her hair as she hummed hymns to a God who never seemed to answer mine. Sometimes, she'd talk to me like I was her shadow. Invisible. But always near. One morning, she caught me staring at a painting in the hall, a woman in a white gown holding a child. Evelyn said, "That's what heaven looks like." I nodded, but inside, I thought, no. Heaven wouldn't have locks on its doors. Weeks bled together until one morning, my hands trembled while scrubbing the floors. The smell of soap made me dizzy. And then, I knew. Something inside me was different. Alive. Growing. At first, I thought it was hope. But no, it was heavier than hope. Warmer. More terrifying. I was carrying life. And in that moment, the whole world tilted. Love and terror collided inside my belly like fire meeting water. I'd felt Thomas's hands once, soft as a promise. And the master's grip, rough as command. Now I didn't know whose sin I carried. Only that it beat beneath my ribs like a secret drum. Evelyn noticed before anyone else. She said nothing at first, only watched me. The way one might watch a clock, waiting for it to stop ticking. She began to hold her prayers longer. To linger near the window whenever her husband passed outside. And one night, when I brought her tea, she asked softly. "Do you believe a soul can split in two, Amara?" I didn't answer. Because I already felt it happening. One half of me still belonged to God. The other was burning in a sin I didn't choose. Then it happened. The master called for me. His voice thick, slurred by drink. Evelyn stood by the stairs, silent. When I passed her, her hand brushed mine, cold, trembling. And in her eyes, I saw it, knowledge. Not ignorance. Not shock. She knew. And she did nothing. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tracing the cracks that looked like rivers leading nowhere. And I thought, this is what it means to drown without water. Days later, as the storm broke over the fields, I saw him again, the master, shirt half undone, chest bare from the heat. And there, beneath his collarbone, a scar. Shaped like a twisted flame. I froze. Because when I dreamt of my unborn child, I saw the same mark, glowing beneath skin not yet born. I thought I was safe in his wife's shadow, until one morning, I saw the mark on the master's chest, the same mark my child would later bear. When the time came, I bit down on a rag to keep the world from hearing me break. The walls of the small room glistened with sweat and candlelight. A single flame danced beside the midwife's trembling hands. She told me to push. And I did, every cry swallowed by cloth, every pain borne in silence. Then, the air changed. A gasp. Once. Twice. I lifted my head, and saw her face. Frozen. Pale. She looked at me, then at the two bundles beside me. One dark. One white. The room went still, like time had stopped to stare. She crossed herself. Whispered, "God have mercy." I reached for them, my twins. Two souls from the same womb, two mirrors of a sin no prayer could wash clean. One carried my skin, the other, his. Their cries blended, a harmony of sorrow and innocence. And I thought, maybe heaven had sent them this way, to remind the world that blood has no color. By dawn, whispers became wildfire. The quarters stirred. The house buzzed like a hive cracking open. They said the devil had taken form in me. That I'd birthed proof of wickedness. That no woman could serve two masters, not even in her womb. When Evelyn entered the room, she looked like a ghost made of lace. Her eyes found the white child first, and she fell to her knees. No scream, no curse, just the sound of a heart splintering in silence. The master came after her. His face, stone and sweat. He ordered the servants out. ordered silence. But silence cannot hold shame. It leaks through walls, through hearts, through blood. That night, I hid my babies beneath a blanket of prayer. Their tiny breaths warmed my arms, their fingers curled around my own like promises I knew I couldn't keep. Then, footsteps. Soft. Slow. I turned. And in the doorway stood Thomas. Rain dripping from his coat, his face older, carved by guilt. His eyes found the twins, then me. Tears cut through the dirt on his cheeks. He said nothing at first. He just stared, as if he was counting the ways his choices had rewritten God's plan. Finally, he whispered. "They have my father's mark." I wanted to scream, to strike him, to weep, but all I could do was hold my children tighter. He stepped closer, voice shaking. "Amara. I came back. I thought I could fix it." I asked him how. "How do you fix a world built on chains?" He didn't answer. Only reached into his coat and pulled out a folded letter, the same seal I'd seen months before, now broken. Inside, I saw words that burned worse than any whip. Transfer to the islands. 2 infants. Mother to be contained. My blood turned to ice. He said he'd intercepted it before it reached the port. That the master was selling us, me and the twins, to cover the shame. He told me I had to choose. Leave with him that night, into the storm, or stay and never see daylight again. My heart split. How do you choose between freedom and the grave of everything you've ever known? Between love and the safety of your children? I looked down at their tiny faces, one light, one dark, and realized freedom wasn't mine to take anymore. It was theirs. So I told him no. That I would not run again. That the world would have to look upon what it had made. His jaw tightened, his eyes filled with something like forgiveness and fear at once. He whispered, "Then I'll stay." And outside, the thunder rolled like the heavens themselves were bearing witness. And when I looked up, Thomas stood in the doorway, his eyes full of rain, and truth. The night Thomas confessed, the world shifted, like the sky itself had leaned closer to listen. He said everything. That he'd returned. That he'd tried to buy my freedom. That the twins were his. The master struck him so hard the air itself flinched. Evelyn screamed, her voice tearing like fabric. "Stop," she cried. "You'll damn us all." But the master's fury was a river with no banks, it drowned everything in its path. He called Thomas a disgrace. Called me something worse. The servants huddled in doorways, eyes wide as moons. The rain outside began to pour harder, as if heaven was trying to wash the truth from the earth. They dragged Thomas toward the barn. Evelyn tried to follow, but he shoved her back, shouting that her prayers couldn't save what was already cursed. I ran after them, barefoot, clutching my babies close, my heart splitting like lightning through wood. The mud swallowed my steps. The night swallowed my screams. When I reached the barn, the door was half open, the light from the torches flickering like fireflies possessed. Inside, the smell of smoke and fear hit first. Voices shouted. Then, silence. A heavy kind. The kind that makes your bones ache before your mind understands why. I pushed the door wider. Thomas wasn't there. Only the rope, still swinging from the beam. For a moment, time forgot how to move. All I could hear was the rope, creaking, whispering. The twins stirred against me, their cries small, confused, alive. I fell to my knees. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. Evelyn appeared behind me, her gown soaked, her face blank as candle wax. She looked up at the beam, and then at me. "This," she said, "is what comes of crossing heaven's order." But her voice trembled, and her hands shook as she clutched her rosary until it snapped. The beads scattered like black rain across the dirt. She looked at the twins, her lips quivering, torn between hate and something dangerously close to love. Then she whispered, almost to herself. "They'll come for you next." And she turned away. I sat there until the fire in the lanterns began to die. Until the storm quieted to a whimper. Until I realized that death had not come for me, not yet. And in that hollow silence, something new began to stir. A secret. Born not of sin, but of survival. That night, as the rest of the plantation slept, pretending not to hear the echoes of what had been done, I buried something beneath the old sycamore tree. Not a body. Not a sin. But a truth the world was never meant to find. And in the ashes of that night, a new secret was born, one that even death could not silence. I buried him beneath the willow. The same tree that once shaded our stolen hours, where words turned to whispers and dreams dared to breathe. Now its roots drank sorrow instead of laughter. For a long while, I wished the earth would take me too. To lie beside him, where the chains of breath could no longer hold me. But when I looked down at my children, I saw the impossible. Both halves of a broken world sleeping side by side. One brown hand. One pale. Both reaching for me. The master came at dawn. His boots heavy with authority, his eyes hollow with the weight of consequence. He said the children would be divided for their own good. One child, the pale one, would be sent north. To live as his blood. To bear his name. To inherit the lie. The other, my dark son, would stay. Nameless. Counted among the bodies that worked the fields his brother would one day own. I begged. I screamed until the sound broke something in my throat. I clutched both children, trying to make my arms a cage no man could break. But power has its own hands. Rough. Cold. Certain. The mistress watched from the window, her eyes wet but unblinking. And when the carriage came, the wheels crushing the wet gravel, I felt the world split in two, just like my womb had. One child crying in my arms. The other reaching through the air, his small hand stretching toward me until the fog swallowed it whole. I fell to my knees, clutching the remaining twin to my chest. The wind carried a faint sound, the other's cry, or maybe my own echo. I couldn't tell anymore. And that's when I knew. The world would one day make them meet again. Not as brothers, but as strangers bound by history's cruel thread. As the horses vanished into the mist, I realized, one day, those two souls would meet again, and neither would know the other's blood. Time is a cruel teacher. It tells you lessons after you've already failed the test. It heals the body, but not the sound of names you'll never call again. The land forgets faces, but not footsteps. Even now, when I walk the old paths, I can hear them, the echo of chains, the rhythm of prayers rising like smoke. Sometimes, I still see the willow swaying in the distance, its branches heavy with secrets. They say the war came. And with it, freedom. But what is freedom to a mother who has lost her halves? Freedom cannot return what was divided. It cannot teach brothers who they are to each other. I've seen the world change its colors, flags rise and fall, masters vanish into dust. Yet every night, I still feel their hands, one dark, one light, slipping through mine. Sometimes, I walk to that old willow tree. The soil still remembers the tears I gave it. I sit beside its roots and whisper both their names, one given, one stolen. The world may not speak them. But the wind does. And on quiet nights, I hear two voices carried through the branches. One speaks of cities and marble floors. Of fine suits and a name carved in silver. The other sings in the fields, deep, strong, and proud. His song lifting toward the stars like freedom itself. I don't know if they've ever met. Perhaps they've passed each other on some dusty road, not knowing why their hearts skipped the same beat. Perhaps one helped the other without a word, drawn by something older than blood, something the world tried to forget. And though the world calls them strangers, a mother always knows, blood remembers. They say the past dies when the body does. But I've learned, stories don't die. They wait. They wait in the soil, in the river, in the heartbeat of children who never knew your name. Every cry I swallowed became a seed. Every tear I shed became rain. And somewhere, those seeds grew into something new. A voice that will not kneel, a soul that will not bow. My name was Amara. They said it meant eternal. And maybe they were right, not because I lived forever. But because my pain became memory. And memory became truth. There's a price to freedom they don't write in books. It's not paid in gold, or glory, or the waving of flags. It's paid in silence. In the empty chair at the table. In the names whispered to trees that no one else will hear. Still, I believe love survives its own burial. It finds new faces, new tongues, new hands to carry what we could not. And when I look at the world now, the fields turn to cities, the chains turn to history. I wonder if my sons walk among them. If, somewhere, they pass each other in a crowd, and feel a stirring in their blood, like a whisper from a time they've forgotten but never lost. Because blood remembers. And so does love. And so do I.